good folks. So it feels really, really, really good to be back. What I'm going to be talking about today is about taking back your professional learning for yourself. Because this is the time over these 3 days when you get to be really, really selfish. This is about your learning, this is about what you need, and this is about putting together something that when you leave here at the end of the day today, you can take it with you. But I want to start with a story, something that happened to me a few months ago. Anybody here handy around the house? Okay, no. Is anybody here actually really handy? Because my husband says that he's handy, but he's not, right? And, you know, so my husband is sort of notorious for being like the DIY guy. You know, I can fix everything. And about a year ago, he moved out to an Indian reservation in Zuni, New Mexico. And when he did that, it was just after he finished dental school. So he was the brand new dentist on this reservation. You know, he sort of knew what he was doing. And it was his third day on the job, and somebody needed some sort of filling removed. And he had never done it before. And he did what any person would do in that situation, right? He ran into the back office and he YouTubed it. How many of you have ever YouTubed, right? Like, so I think that really, this idea of you know, going to YouTube and seeing like, what the heck is going on? How can I fix this? How can I do it? And then, you know, here are all the other ones that I can turn to if this one doesn't work. He actually was able to remove the old filling, had a pretty successful visit. I am happy to report that the patient is still doing fine today, many months later. But it sort of made me realize that we are turning into a group of YouTube mechanics, right? Mm-hmm. So my husband is a self-described tooth mechanic. But I think that we are all YouTube mechanics, right? So whether we're trying to fix the sink, or whether we're trying to try a new teaching practice, this idea of sort of going to YouTube, watching what somebody else did, and trying to figure it out on our own is growing more and more popular. YouTube mechanics, you know, for dental work, if you've never been to dental school, still not sure about that. So, but you know, I think that when we start to think about this, what this really speaks to is the ways that learning is changing. So, you know, I started teaching third grade, and when I started teaching third grade, one of the things that really struck me was to see this change in content, and the content that was available to us. And the things that are available to us now that weren't available to us then, always at our fingertips. And how that has fundamentally changed the ways that we learn. Because when I was growing up, when I wanted to learn something, I had to go to school to learn it, because that was where the information was. But the information isn't there anymore. The information is everywhere. And we have access to that information, and we have to think about how we want to use it. So when you think about YouTube mechanic, right, when you're sort of engaged in that, the reason it's different than traditional learning is that you were driving. You were the one going, here's this problem, I have to fix it. Sometimes you have to rewind, right, and you have to look at it again, or try it a couple of different times. And typically with, you know, YouTube mechanics that I've interviewed throughout my research, when they get it, you know, when they finally are able to replace the hubcap or whatever the piece is that they're trying to figure out, they get really excited. How many of you have had these experiences while being YouTube mechanics? Yeah. Somebody who is feeling really brave right now, tell me about your YouTube mechanic experience, because every time someone shares this with me, I am always astonished at what people are able to do.
I fixed my washing machine.
Tell me more about that.
Well, there's sometimes that little agitator in the middle, it stops spinning, and it turns out that there are these little pieces in there called dogs.
Okay.
And you have to take it apart, remove the dogs, and put new ones in.
How many YouTube videos did you have to watch to do this?
One.
Only one? Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
I turned off the light on my BMW that I could not figure out how to turn off by watching 4 videos.
4 videos.
I had a similar experience, except I learned after being talked into buying like this $28 plastic part that's supposed to help guide your new belt on, that I could use zip tie. And I learned that on YouTube, and that was like revolutionary. That changed my life.
Oh my God.
I'm totally a YouTube mechanic.
You guys might enjoy this. I have a smartphone, and I thought it was my battery that was not charging right. I looked up on YouTube, why is my battery going bad? And they said that the prongs inside when you're putting the piece in and out, the prongs themselves inside there get bent. Makes sense. And they showed me how to get in there and just fix the prongs.
And fix your problem? That's
I
amazing.
did that.
So I'm in good company here. I will tell you that the strangest thing that I've ever YouTubed, my colleague Mabel, who's with me today, was with me. We were in a zip car, and it was a hybrid zip car. We had never driven in a hybrid before. We had no idea how to turn the parking brake off. So we're sitting in the car going, this isn't right, this isn't right. We YouTubed how to turn the parking brake off, and got on our way. We were very excited when that happened, because it could have been a little dangerous. So learning looks really, really different. And the reason it looks different is because the learners themselves are in control, right? So you are the one who's deciding what you want to learn, when you want to learn it, and how you want to learn it. It just so happens that lots of folks are turning to YouTube as the how in this YouTube mechanic phenomenon, but there are a million other ways that you are probably learning something really, really valuable to you. And what we're going to try to talk about today is how you can actually have a framework for that kind of learning when it comes to your teaching practice. So when it comes to who you are in the classroom, where you are, and we can kind of put an idea around that so that you can start to take some of the things that you're learning over these 3 days and use them throughout the summer, throughout the year, and keep having those really good resources delivered right to your front door. So turn to someone, you might want to stand up, talk to someone you don't know, right? Introduce yourself, tell them who you are and what you do. Describe your absolute best learning experience within the last year. Could be anything. Something you learned how to do that you felt that when you were finished, you really, really got it. And as you share that with someone in this room, think about all of the learning elements, because we're all educators and we can't turn it off, right? Think about all those learning elements that you hear as the person shares their story. So get up, find someone you don't know, share a learning experience. All right, I want to bring it back together. As you listen to those learning experiences, and as you reflected on the qualities of those experiences, what were some of the qualities that you heard? And feel free to just shout them out. What were some of the qualities of those experiences that you heard?
Real life experience.
Real life experience.
Need to know.
I
Needing to know that.
I need to know this for some reason.
Relevant.
Relevant.
Self-motivated. I was doing it because I wanted to do it.
Doing it because you wanted to do it. Keeping up with the changes.
There was a model.
There was a model.
Prior knowledge was a big part of discriminating whether or not this is any good.
Prior knowledge. And also, like you had said, figuring out, is this good, is this not good, and kind of moving from there. Yeah.
I did it with other people, so it was kind of like a shared learning, and that sense that we all kind of took our, expertise to another level was.
The social piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Having the time to explore something, so a sacred time or a time that's dedicated to that.
So you're not distracted in a lot of different ways. That's a really good point. So now I want you to take all of those things that we just listed. Relevant, you need to know it, social, you're able to discriminate based on your prior knowledge if it's any good or not. And I just want you in your mind, you don't have to say anything, I just want you to think about it. Kind of compare that to every professional development experience you've had in the last year, and think to yourself, how many of those were like, yeah, and how many of those were like, And I've been in both in the last year. I've been in both. And so I think that, it's really at the point where I would say, based on the mental calculations that you're likely doing, it's probably time for a change. And if we listen to the research, and if we look at the research that's come out in about the last year, it's pretty depressing. It's pretty depressing. So this is what most professional development looks like, right? I'm pretty sure that, like, this guy, he's definitely asleep. Like, he's, you know, it's the post-lunch slump for that. And I think that, you know, we've sort of been put in situations for many, many moons, right, as educators, where we do a lot of listening, and that's what we think professional learning is. And when we look at the research as to how we feel about this type of experience, how people learn, which is one of the most widely respected research documents on transfer of learning, it basically says, hey, the ways that we're teaching adults, and this isn't just teachers, it's just most adults, consistently violates the principles that optimize learning. Because we all have in our head what we actually think learning should be. We think learning should be hard. And we should sit there with a big binder, and we should highlight. And then there's going to be a test at the end. If you look at what the Center for Public Education, they did a very large study, both quantitative and qualitative, where they said that most teachers are reporting that the PD is completely useless. And I think that this is coming to light right now for lots of different reasons. I think it's coming to light because we are at a point where change is happening so fast that the old ways of learning just won't ramp us up as quick as we need to ramp up. And so there was an ISTE white paper that came out maybe a little over a year ago that said if we don't model what new learning should look like, it's unlikely that we as educators are going to be able to take that back to our classrooms. And someone shared modeling was one of the really important parts of their best learning experience. So as we start to think about what our needs are, how fast things are changing, what that leads us to is, well, what skills might we be missing? So this is actually some research that was taken from about 35,000 educators across the nation. And right now, those 35,000 educators, which represent about 5 million students, it's about 1 in 10 schools, 1/4 of all of those educators don't know anything about having an online presence. So we've got some who have a low, majority of a medium, some who have a high, and some who have a very high knowledge. So that's a skill that we can work on that will actually give us the tools we need to change what professional learning looks like. Here's another data point from that same study. So the time that's actually spent each year in professional learning on instructional technology. The majority of, you still have 1/4 who aren't getting any, which I'm really confused by that. But then you've got the majority of folks who are in this 1 to 8 hours range. So they get about a day's worth of instructional technology professional development over the course of the year. Now, these are huge aggregates that we're looking at. I think that everywhere I go across the country, I see bright spots. I see places and spaces where people are beating this, knocking it out of the park. This is sort of the very, very broad brush picture from across the United States. And what we're seeing is that only 8 hours is being spent for most teachers in professional development on instructional technology. And if we look for what's actually required, the most conservative estimates are saying 14 hours. So the most conservative estimates are saying, listen, if you have 14 hours on a sustained topic, then you are likely to implement it effectively in your classroom. There are some studies that say 26 and 27. This is the most conservative estimate. But we know that most educators right now are getting 8 hours. So that leads me to a really important question. How do we design around this problem? We know that the kinds of learning experiences that we've had in the past might not be best suited for all the changes that are coming down the pipe. We know that we have skill gaps when it comes to online presence, and we also know that we're not spending enough time. And I think the reason we're not spending enough time is just because of all of the constraints of the system, right? Like you have this many days for professional development and this many release days and there are only so many hours that you actually have. So I think we need to start to get really, really creative about designing around this new and different. And so I will tell you that when I started in this journey to becoming sort of a connected professional developer who had professional development at my fingertips all the time from my device, I started out being completely unconnected. So I actually had one of those old flip phones. It didn't even text. I had a car that I specifically purchased that was 3 years old because it didn't have any computers in it, so I would know how to fix it. I was, in the very early stages of this process just a few years ago. And then, after I changed my practice, amazing things started to happen. So Craig Fugate, who's the head of FEMA, Skyped into my middle school class to give my kids feedback on their hurricane plan. Arnie Duncan met with me in the Department of Education in Washington to learn about EdCamp and the kinds of professional development models that were happening throughout the country. And Debbie, who lives in San Francisco, saw that I moved there a year ago, took me on a tour, and helped me find my apartment because we actually had interest in the same teaching and learning topic on literacy. So how do you get from the flip phone that doesn't text to this, right? How do you get from point A to point B? And the first thing I will tell you is that it's really messy, it takes a long time, and there's no wrong way to do it. So if you're sitting there going, I tried this Twitter thing, it didn't work for me, that's okay. There's probably something else that might work for you. Because the most important thing that I've learned from my many years of being a YouTube mechanic is if the first video doesn't work, try it. So I think that everything that I share with you today is something to take and say, this might work for me, but I also might need to adapt this so that it does work for me. So to kind of put these ideas together in a way that makes sense, I developed a framework, and it's called user-generated learning. And this framework is a way that you can sort of make sense of this journey from the unconnected person with the flip phone to the person who's using Twitter to have Craig Fugate Skype with his class. So this is sort of the roadmap, if you will. If you're sitting there going, I'm connected a little bit, but I could be doing this better. How do I get there? This is going to sort of lay out for you sort of the steps in the process. There are 3 main steps: curation, reflection, and contribution. And today I'm going to give you one action step in each area. That doesn't mean that each action step is the one you should take, but I'm hoping that after the end of today, you'll have at least one commitment to change your learning by becoming a user-generated learner in some way. So we're going to start with curation. It's important to know that these 3 phases, they're sort of indistinct at times, right? They can overlap. You might be doing one and then another, and all of that's okay because that kind of contributes to the messiness. But we're going to start with curation. So curation is sort of your ability as a learner to tame the web, to make the web something that doesn't feel like IKEA and makes it feel more like the boutique that has just the 5 things you want. So when I go into IKEA, not only do I become very fearful that I might actually have to assemble all of these things, but I also wonder, how do I know what's in that box? And there are all of these boxes to choose from, and it's really overwhelming. Curation is taking that into the 3 dresses with heels that match your favorite color and the exact event that you're trying to attend. It can be a lot of work if you do it through the Google search. But I would actually recommend using some tools that will have that information delivered to you. How many people here are using an app like Flipboard or Zite? Anybody? Cool. Anybody trying Twitter? Cool. Anybody trying something called an RSS feed? A couple people? Okay. So I'm going to show you one of the best ways that I get the information that I want to pay attention to delivered to me. And that is Feedly. Anybody using Feedly? So Feedly is a way that you can actually follow blogs that are written by other educators that are interested in the same things that you're interested in. And you only see what they post. And you don't have to go check all their sites, you just go to one place. So I'm going to show you here, I'm going to log in. And this is my Feedly. So I follow probably about 40 or 50 blogs. This is Richard Burns' blog. I know he had a session yesterday. I follow EdSurge. I follow the New York Times. I follow Scott McCloud. These are all great folks that you can follow. You might have different interests than me, but these are my particular interests. They kind of lend towards literacy as well as instructional leadership. And anytime one of these people posts a new post on their blog, it shows up in my list. So I don't need to go out to the web and look for it. I can just easily scroll down the list, and if something looks interesting to me, I click on it, and I can read whatever it might be. The other thing that's really, really cool about this is, let's say that I read this article. So this is Nick Provenzano. He's doing this really cool thing for redesigning his classroom. It's called Classroom Cribs, if you've ever seen that crib show on MTV. And so if I want to remember this, I can just put a tag on it. I'm going to put a tag on it that says best practice. So if I want to go back and find this later, when I look at all of the things I've tagged under best practice, it'll be right here. And this is how I team the web. It's how I keep up to date on things that are happening, good ideas for teaching, and then how eventually I get back to them. Because if I want to look at everything that I have about PLCs, I just click on my PLC tag and all the articles pop right up, and I can just get right back to them. So this is a really great tool, if you're not using it, that you can check out to help you curate the most important points for you in a particular topic or on something that you're interested in. So the other phase of this is reflection. So when you think about reflection, reflection is taking all of that information that you've tamed from the web, right? So you've shopped in your boutique, and then thinking and sharing about it. So for me, to get the most value out of reflection, it has to be personal first, but then it has to be public. So my primary tool for reflecting on things that I've done and how it's worked is sort of a combination between my blog and Twitter. So I wrote a post about, it's called What's Your Waffle House? And this was just sharing a lesson that I had done with my students. And after I shared that lesson, I tweeted about it. And George Kuros, who, if you know George, he's also an educator from up in Canada, as well as Ken Templeton, they started responding to what I wrote and giving me other ideas. So maybe we don't want to talk about Waffle Houses. What could you do with Pop-Tarts? You know, like what's the best food item? How could you have kids come up with these other ideas? And so we kind of had this really interesting conversation, and then I was able to go back and try something different based on what I had learned. And so if the action item for curation is to find some blogs to follow and follow them on something like Feedly, the action item for reflection is somehow, and the vehicle doesn't matter, make your reflection public. Share your reflection and put it out there for people. And if you're more comfortable leaving it anonymous, that's fine. But share your reflection about something you tried and see what other people will respond. I think you'll be really surprised at how valuable it is to have someone else go, I'm completely outside of your realm of experience, right? I live very far away and I don't know anything about your kids or your classroom, but have you tried this? And all of a sudden your eyes might open up and you might go, I never thought of it that way. And so for me, while it's always incredibly valuable to have those conversations with my grade level colleagues or other colleagues who are very geographically close, it's sometimes really valuable to have someone who is from completely outside of my experience offer something that might seem a little crazy at first, but actually is really, really powerful. And so the last piece here is contribution. So I always think that after you curate and you learn from all of these amazing sources, you try something and you reflect on it, you get some public feedback, then give back. So what did you learn from this process? How can you give back? And that can happen in lots of different ways. So one of the ways that I've seen it happen is I've seen sometimes schools will organize sort of a TEDx, and everybody gets 10 minutes or 12 minutes, and they go up and they sort of share their learning journey and sort of give back to the other people in the room. It could be as simple as a meeting, right, in the faculty room, where you're coming together to share everything that you've learned on this particular topic. Or, and I'm certainly biased, it could be through something like an ed camp. How many ed campers do I have in the room? Do I have any ed campers? Awesome. So if you're not familiar with ed camp is something that I started in May of 2010 to allow educators the ability to sort of take back their professional development and really give back. It's not a fancy idea. It's not a sophisticated idea. And after I tell you what the idea is, you'll probably go, wait, I could have thought of that, or I could have done that. It's very, very simple. But that's exactly the point. The point is that there's a really low barrier to entry. How an ed camp works is you have a set of time, right? So maybe you have an hour, maybe you have 3 hours, maybe you have 6 hours. And with that time, you put up a big blank chart on the wall. And it has rooms at the top and times on the side. And people just put in the grid what they want to learn about. And then you go into those rooms or those conversations or those sessions, and you talk about it. Your job as putting a session up is to ask the first question. So it's understood that there are just different levels of expertise in the room. Now, what I'm basically telling you is that all ed camp is putting a piece of paper up on the wall and having other people say what they want to learn about. It's really simple. And so when we had the first one, we thought like, oh, that's cool, we had one of these. And then we couldn't believe it, but 3 months later, somebody else wanted to have one in their town. We were like, wow, we've had 2 ed camps in a year. This is amazing. At the end of the year, we had 4 ed camps. We were stoked. Then something happened that I can't even tell you. We started tweeting about it. Okay, we put up a wiki and we started tweeting about every time there was an ed camp event, which is not all that often. We started saying, hey, this is going on, check it out. I stand here today about 4.5 years into this movement. There have been 550 events in 15 countries. There's an average of 7 events every Saturday. All because it's a really simple idea that we started sharing through social media. So that's another really easy way to give back, to sort of have an ed camp experience at your school or at your event. There is a short video here. We're not going to show it because of time today. But if you want to learn more about that and how that might work, it's a really great way to sort of jumpstart the kind of learning that we've all talked about. That it's relevant, it's something that you're interested in, and you're sort of driving the bus. But what I'd like you to do right now is I'd like you to share a commitment. You don't have to share it out loud. If you'd like to tweet it to the hashtag eduIMPACT, we will be choosing one of the most interesting ones, and you will get a wonderful, fabulous prize. So take a moment, reflect on what you've heard. Reflect on this idea of curation, reflection, and contribution as ways of organizing your own professional learning. So this isn't necessarily what your district tells you to do, or the state tells you to do, or the county office tells you to do. This is what you are telling yourself to do because it's important to you for your practice. And think about those 3 areas and pick one thing that you might want to do. And you can just write it down, or you can just think about it, or if you want to tweet it, just take a few minutes to think about that. will kick this off by sharing my small start. So when I think about curation, reflection, and contribution, one of the things that has popped up in my user-generated learning circle is an app called Voxer. If you've never heard of Voxer, it's basically like a walkie-talkie app. And you can have groups of people that asynchronously walkie-talkie to each other. And I am in a Voxer group, and I am the delinquent person in the Voxer group. So I never listen to the Voxes, and I never respond, and I really want to, but I always forget. So one of my small starts is I'm actually going to start listening to the Literacy Voxer group 1 day a week, and probably it'll take me about 7 or 8 minutes, and I'm going to try to contribute something back to that. So that's my small start for something that I'm working on. Would anyone else like to share kind of what they're thinking as they move forward from this experience at eduIMPACT and kind of roll into the new year?
Well, I like what you said about putting yourself out there and getting feedback, and kind of being open to that, because I have a blog, but I've been putting kind of stage stuff on there. So I want to put out things like struggles and try to get some feedback from other administrators.
And what's your blog?
It's GSavera@WordPress.
Okay.
It's on my Twitter.
It's not great. It's not great. I'm going to have to check it out now. Let's go. There's some great. Other small starts?
I'd like to do an ed camp at my school.
Love it.
Very cool.
Yeah. Get the kids involved.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Wait,
There have been a lot of really cool things happening in California right now. People are actually having ed camps with kids, which has been really, really cool. They add a lot to the conversation. So, I saw someone in the back.
Yeah, I'm trying to tweak this, this is new to me, so.
Oh,
I want-
congratulations.
I want to start a Feedly account, is that what you call it, or
Uh-huh.
Feedly, okay, and put some name flyers, that's my small start.
Very
For
cool.
people to follow along.
Awesome. Perfect.
Jennifer and I are gonna be working on, coming in like maybe after school, sort of like ed camp, I guess, and, having computers open and have like where teachers can come in maybe like once a month for a couple of hours and just whatever question they have, because, I'm the one who uses the technology the most, and a lot of them are, I think these are comfortable and they can have questions, and that's where we can start like our own little staff Facebook, district staff only, which would be kind of fun, something.
I love those ideas. Those are great. Any other thoughts?
Doing a presentation next week, way our district is organizing our instructions called the Theory of Action. And I thought that I would, before I heard your idea of ed camp, to try to see if any of those people are interested in continuing to work through the year on various projects. So ed camp would be the way to go.
There you go, and it's super simple, right? Yeah. Well, these are amazing, great starts. Thank you for sharing them. I want to leave you with a thought here, and I can say this because it's not almost a lunch, so I can show this video, but this is about professional learning, and it's a really great metaphor. Basically, it's going to show you a real live video as to what happens when flies go into a jar. So if you put a bunch of fleas into a jar and you actually put the lid on the jar and then you wait, I think it's about 24 hours or so, maybe a little less. And then if you come back to the jar and you take the lid off, they actually won't fly out of the jar. They stay inside the jar, even if the jar is not there, if you break the jar. And so I think that this is a really, really stirring image that has a lot to do with professional development, right? Because if we think about it, you don't want to be the lid, right? You wanna be able to sort of unleash all of those ideas, because the second that you start to limit yourself, you become very comfortable inside those constraints. And I will be honest and say most of the things that I've suggested today will probably make you feel a little bit uncomfortable at some point, but that means that you're doing it right. So as you leave eduIMPACT today, and as you think about this upcoming year, and as you think about yourself as a learner, feel free to try out curation, reflection, and contribution. And, I'd love for you to sort of join into my learning community as well. So, tweet me or let me know how it's going, or send me a message or an email or a blog post or whatever works for you. I'd love to continue in this dialogue, because I think that the most important thing that we can do as educators is to value ourselves as learners and show that same value to our kids. So thanks for joining me today, and thanks for learning a little bit about this, and I would love to open it up for any questions you might have.
I have your book, the one with the green cover, and just, I guess, a question. In the book, you mentioned a lot about Google Reader, which I think has come and gone already. Yeah. So what do you recommend for curating in place of that?
Feedly.
Feedly.
Yeah. It's free, and it has all of the same functionality as Google Reader, and I think it actually works a little better now.
And it's not specifically then just for blogs, but just for any
site.
Any site. Okay.
Yeah. Good question.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Don't worry, I used to be a kindergarten teacher. I have excellent wait time.
The thing that comes to my mind is the time. And, I'm a department chair. And so the thing that I always think about, if you approach your staff with stuff like this, for some people, they're going to be right on it, because it's going to be a really big learning curve. And so the time factor, as teachers, I'm sure you're aware, is the big thing for us.
And I don't think that we can make any more time. I think that we can all agree that there are no more hours in the day, but I think that we could all agree to stop doing one thing and maybe try doing this. So one of the things that I found really effective with some of the teachers I work with is whenever I decide to roll out something new, I actually take a piece of paper and I fold it in half, and I say, we have to put one thing over here that we're going to stop doing if we're going to start doing this. And what's the right thing to put on this side of the paper and the right thing to put on this side of the paper. And sometimes that has to be a decision we make as a team, and sometimes it has to be a decision that they can make on their own. But for a good example was, I used to do like a newsletter for all of the third grade teachers, and it took me a lot of time. And we really kind of wanted to start moving in this direction. And so I said, what if we stopped doing that and started doing this? And it was like, well, yeah, that would free up 30 minutes a week. And I think to your point, we forget that sometimes we can make those changes. Yeah, that's a really good point though, about the time. Any other questions or thoughts? Well, it was great to meet all of you. Thank you for sharing your success as YouTube mechanic stories. I will be sure to relate them all back to my husband. And have a wonderful rest of the time here. I think I'm a couple minutes over, but hopefully not too far over. And I will be hanging around if you want to chat or connect and just talk more about this stuff. Mabel, do we have a winner?
Yeah, Leslie Clark.
Leslie Clark? Yay! All right. So Leslie Clark shared her small start on Twitter, and we have a copy of my new book for her.